The sea had begun to change with the seasons, its surface now darker, the waves gentler, like a body at rest. The cottage stood quietly against the cliffside, the white paint cracked and weathered by years of wind, salt, and memory. It had been 3 months since Adrian's final message arrived, 3 months since Lila and Sophia had come here to start over. Each morning began the same, the faint light of dawn spilling through the curtains, the soft sound of waves tapping against the shore, and Sophia's violin warming the air like breath. The cottage that once carried the ghosts of Lila's past had begun to feel alive again. Lila moved slowly these days, with a calmness she didn't recognize in herself. The tension that had once sat behind her ribs, the endless ache of betrayal and unfinished revenge, had finally loosened its grip. She no longer dreamed of Adrian's face, or of the moment he stole her song. Instead, she dreamed of open water and music she hadn't yet written. Still, sometimes, the past returned. One gray morning, as Lila was organizing old sheet music, she found a recording device buried in a box at the back of the closet. It was one of Adrian's, small, silver, the kind he used to carry everywhere. Her hands hesitated as she picked it up. She almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity was its own kind of gravity. She pressed play. At first, only static. Then, her own voice. "You can't do this, Adrian. You can't." His reply, smooth, cruel, "It's not about what I can do, Lila. It's about what people will believe. And they'll believe me." Her breath caught. The recording was from that night, the night everything collapsed, the night he took her melody and turned it into his masterpiece. She heard the scuffle, the piano bench toppling over, the sharp sound of something breaking, maybe her composure, maybe her faith in him. Then the music started, faintly, as if recorded through the walls. Adrian's performance. Her silent note. Her own song, bleeding through her betrayal. Lila stopped the recording, heart pounding. Even after all this time, it still hurt, not with the sharp pain of loss, but the dull ache of remembering who she'd been before the silence. She placed the device down, exhaling. "He really kept everything," she murmured. Behind her, Sophia appeared, rubbing her eyes. "Who's that?" Lila smiled faintly. "Just old ghosts." Was that Daddy's voice? Yes. Sophia walked closer, looking up at her. "Do you miss him?" The question landed like a whisper on glass. Lila thought for a moment. "Sometimes," she said finally. "But not the way I used to." "What do you mean?" "I used to miss the person I wanted him to be," Lila said softly. "Now I remember who he really was, and I think that's enough." Sophia nodded as if she understood, then placed her small hand over Lila's. "Maybe that's what love is," she said simply. Remembering, but not hurting anymore. Lila felt something tighten in her chest. The wisdom of a child, innocent, unfiltered, pure. "Maybe it is," she whispered. The days continued quietly, but the world outside was beginning to notice her again. A journalist had tracked her down, a young woman named Nora Vale, who wrote about lost artists and musical scandals. She'd sent a letter, handwritten, polite, "Ms. Hart, the world knows Adrian Choi's side of the story. I'd like to hear yours. Not the gossip, not the revenge. The truth." Lila had almost ignored it. But something about the way the letter was written, no flattery, no pity, made her pause. Maybe the world was finally ready to listen. 2 weeks later, Nora arrived at the cottage. She was sharp-eyed but gentle, carrying a worn leather notebook and an old camera. "This place is beautiful," Nora said as she stepped inside. "You can feel the music in the air." Lila smiled faintly. "It's mostly ghosts and seagulls." They sat at the kitchen table, cups of tea steaming between them. Sophia hovered nearby, pretending to read but listening closely. "Before we start," Nora said, "I want you to know, this isn't about scandal. People think revenge is the loudest story. But sometimes, silence is more powerful. That's what your music taught me." Lila studied her for a moment. "Then you already understand more than most." Nora smiled. "Tell me about her silent note. What did it mean to you?" Lila looked down at her hands. "It was my voice. My truth. I wrote it when I couldn't say what I felt anymore. Every note was a confession. And when Adrian took it, it felt like he stole my heartbeat." "Why did he do it?" Nora asked softly. Lila hesitated. "Because he could. Because the world was built to believe him. He was the genius, the prodigy, the man who could do no wrong. I was just the woman in the background." There was a silence between them, heavy but not hostile. "Did you ever love him?" Nora asked. Lila smiled sadly. "Of course. Love doesn't vanish just because it's betrayed. It lingers. It decays. It haunts." Nora's pen stopped moving. "And now? Now I'm learning to love something else, peace." Nora sat back, thoughtful. "What do you want people to remember about you, Lila?" "That I wasn't silent by choice," Lila said. "And that silence can be louder than revenge." Sophia looked up from her book and said shyly, "She's writing new songs now." Nora smiled. "Maybe the world needs to hear them." Lila looked at her piano, sunlight spilling across the keys. "Maybe," she said quietly. That night, after Nora left, the house felt full of echoes, not of ghosts, but of possibility. The idea of returning to music scared her, but it also pulled at something deep inside her chest. She sat at the piano long after Sophia had gone to bed, fingers hovering above the keys. She didn't want to write about Adrian anymore. She wanted to write about what came after. She began with a soft E minor chord, then shifted, something hopeful, unresolved. A melody formed slowly, patient and searching. It wasn't her silent note. It was something newer, freer, a sound that felt like breathing again after years underwater. She lost herself in it, hours slipping by unnoticed, until she realized someone was watching. Sophia stood by the door, holding her violin. "Can I play with you?" Lila nodded. "Always." The girl joined in, her notes bright and trembling, weaving through Lila's melody like sunlight through leaves. Together, they built something pure, a song that wasn't born from pain but from the space pain had left behind. When they finished, Lila whispered, "We'll call it the sound of tomorrow." Weeks passed. The song grew. Nora returned with a small recording crew from a local music foundation. "You don't have to perform for the world," she said, "just record it. Let it live." Lila hesitated, her old fears returning like shadows. But Sophia squeezed her hand. "If you play it, other people who are sad will feel better. Like me." And that was enough. They recorded in the cottage, the sound of the sea faintly in the background. No studio polish, no perfection, just honesty. When the final note faded, even the air seemed to hold its breath. When Nora released the recording online, she titled it her silent note, Reborn. Within days, it spread. People didn't care about the scandal anymore, they cared about the sound. It was raw, emotional, alive. Critics called it a resurrection of soul. Musicians called it a lesson in forgiveness. Lila didn't read the comments or watch the interviews. She spent her days teaching Sophia scales, walking the cliffs, and writing new pieces. The world could listen or not, it didn't matter anymore. She was finally writing for herself. But one evening, as the sun dipped low, she received a package. No sender. Inside was a USB drive and a short note. He wanted this to reach you when it was time. A friend. Lila hesitated, then plugged it in. A video file opened. Adrian, sitting at a piano in a dimly lit room. His hair was shorter, his face thinner, his eyes softer. Lila, he said, voice quiet. If you're seeing this, I guess you survived me, which, knowing you, I always knew you would. He smiled faintly. I used to think I could outplay you. Outshine you. But I finally realized something. You were never trying to win. You were just trying to feel. He looked down at the keys. This is my last song. I called it Echo in E minor. It's not perfect, but then again, neither were we. He began to play. The melody was fragile, incomplete, a reflection of a man unraveling but still searching for redemption. Halfway through, a familiar theme emerged, her silent note. But instead of ending in tragedy, it lifted, transforming into something new. When he finished, he looked up again. If I could do it all over, I'd give the world your version instead of mine. Goodbye, Lila. The screen faded to black. She sat there for a long time, her throat tight, tears slipping down her face. For the first time, she didn't feel hatred. Just understanding. She whispered to the empty room, "You finally listened." Later, Lila took Sophia down to the shore. The waves glowed under the pale moonlight. She handed Sophia a smooth white stone. "Throw it as far as you can," Lila said. "Why?" "Because it's a wish." Sophia grinned and tossed it into the sea. "What did you wish for?" Lila smiled. "That we never run out of songs." Sophia looked thoughtful. "I don't think we will. The ocean makes new ones every day." They stood together, hand in hand, the water rushing around their feet. The sea stretched endlessly before them, wide, forgiving, alive. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a faint piano echoed in her memory. She didn't know if it was real or imagined, but it didn't matter. It was no longer a ghost, it was a harmony. And as the tide pulled the last light from the sky, Lila finally understood what her silent note had always meant. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about loss. It was about the silence that comes after pain, the quiet space where new music is born. The waves whispered their approval, carrying the last echoes of the past away. Sophia began to hum beside her, a soft, uncertain melody that the sea quickly carried. Lila joined in, their voices blending, imperfect but beautiful. In that fragile, endless moment, everything that had broken was whole again. And for the first time since her voice was stolen, Lila sang. The next morning rose quietly, the kind of golden, weightless dawn that felt like a clean page. The sea stretched wide and calm beneath the soft light, and the wind that drifted through the cottage windows carried the scent of salt and new beginnings. Lila woke before Sophia and sat at the piano. The old instrument no longer felt like a reminder of what was lost, it felt like home again. She pressed one key, then another, letting the notes drift into the morning air. No anger, no grief. Just sound. She had once thought silence was her punishment. But now she knew silence had been her teacher. It taught her how to listen, how to forgive, how to find herself again in the spaces between the noise. As she played, Sophia padded into the room, hair messy, violin tucked under one arm. Without a word, she joined in. Their music filled the cottage, spilling out through the open windows and into the wide blue beyond. It was a song of peace, of endings and beginnings, of everything that had been broken and healed again through sound. When they finished, Lila looked at the girl beside her, the living proof that life continues, that music never really dies. Do you think people will still listen to our songs 100 years from now? Sophia asked. Lila smiled softly. If they do, I hope they don't just hear the pain. I hope they hear the courage. Sophia grinned. Then we should write more. Lila laughed, freely, without restraint, and nodded. Then let's begin. She opened a fresh page in her worn notebook, the same one that had once held her revenge. Only this time, she wrote 4 words at the top, for the ones who listen. Outside, the tide was shifting again, pulling back from the shore as the morning grew brighter. The world had forgiven her, but more importantly, she had forgiven herself. There was no need to look back now. Adrian's ghost had faded into the waves, his final melody buried in the sound of the sea. What remained was hers alone, the voice she had reclaimed, the peace she had earned, the music that would outlive them all. Lila stood, opened the window wide, and let the wind carry her last whisper into the sunlight. "This is my note," she said softly. And it's no longer silent. The sea answered with a hush, the sky opened in color, and somewhere between the light and the sound, the final echo of her silent note rose, not as an ending, but as a promise. And then, with nothing left to forgive, Lila played on.